What's coming off around here?
If you guys playing railroad anymore today, there's a landslide, a new cut.
I've been thinking over the requirements that I have on hand here in order to successfully build a foundation for the structure. And I've cut a piece of the mat board out already that's sized to the structure and also the extension. And a couple of things are in my mind right now. I've been thinking about it pretty hard, and it's kind of a challenge for me. I've never having done anything like this before. But the thing that seems to be the biggest trick of all is the way in which I have to approach being able to put in the track, lay the track in here, that it's actually flush with this mat board, which is going to be the foundation. So it has occurred to me that when I do cut that, what I have to do then is cut slices, 2 slices, where the 2 tracks will lie, at the thickness of the track. So there's going to be a lot of the foundation that has to get cut away and then the track laid in. But the trick to do that, the trick to lay the track in, is going to be what I think, this is my solution anyway, it's going to be this flexible piece of plastic, which is going to be basically cut to the same shape as this mat board, but it's going to be actually where the track gets cemented to. The track will get glued onto here, and then set aside. When this gets cut out, then the track will get brought up underneath, and this whole thing will be getting glued to the underside of the mat board foundation, so that the track will be held in place by this. So that's going to be a little bit difficult. I don't have to cut and the mat board won't get cut apart, just sections will get cut out where the track will lay. And for that, the reason for that is because when you look at the locomotive and its size in relation, or its length in relation to the structure, it can be seen that the locomotive doesn't need to come to the back of the structure, but it'll probably come to about where this dowel is laying, so that there'll be what do they call them, stops for the back of the track to prevent the train from going farther and inadvertently crashing into the back. But there's that pretty much outlines my approach, and then there's a couple of little things that I need to consider before I start even building this additional structure on the side. And the extension is going to be attached to the main structure. And one of the things I noticed about all this is that the structure originally depended upon this board. It was mounted on this thick piece of hardwood, and because that was like that, the structure was pretty much held true. But with this structure being cut away from it the way I've done, it's going to be difficult to see, but there's actually along here, it's visible that the wall has actually cupped in slightly. So what I'm thinking, and it also serves 2 purposes, but I'm thinking is that I can take and place some small pieces of perhaps wood, perhaps plastic, but something that when the building gets set down onto the foundation, it won't be permanent, so that I can actually remove it. What's going to be permanent on the layout will be the foundation. But I was thinking that I can make some kind of pieces that will that will go in between these risers and will actually allow me to snap the model over, just place the model over those additional pieces, and then it will hold the model in place, and it'll actually help to bring this wall back out, because the wall is actually flexible to the point where I can comfortably do that and not damage it. But I'm also kind of hoping that when I put the extension on and actually make it part of the structure, that the extension itself will help to pull this wall back out into shape, so it's not tucking under. So that's the idea. Also, I want to point out that the extension's actually inset from the back of the model. There's a slight inset there. And I did that because of a large piece of wood that's right there. I didn't want to try to cut that in any way in order to put the extension on. And it also gave me something good and solid to glue the new framing for the extension. So that'll work out nice. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that although not this long, I'm going to play whatever track, when I get the straight track cut to length, I'm going to have it extend out farther, and that this will be a bit like a cement slab at the entrance to the building. So it might only be about half the length that it currently is. But that's my plan, and all I need to do is go ahead and start figuring out exactly what I want to do next. I think what I want to do next is going to be to cut these slots for the track. And so that way I'll have to take some careful measurements so that the track centers are true to the doors going in. So we'll see how that works out. I'm doing my newbie thing here by, I have my matte board foundation, and I covered it with this matte varnish, and it's just now drying, but I noticed it began to bow up a little bit in the center, and so being a newbie, I probably did it wrong, and I put some tape to hold the center down so it doesn't warp as much. Looks like it's warping over on this side too as well, so I'll probably tape that. But hey, I'm open to suggestions. If there's a better way to do this, I'd certainly appreciate being told. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep it flat as I can, let it dry. I'll flip it over, do the same as and then maybe put another coat on it. But I hope it doesn't start to really distort. We'll find out. Well, the distortion, it turns out, is not too terribly bad. There's a slight amount now that I've completed it. I varnished both sides. I noticed the one side looks like I may have gotten more coats on it than this side, so I might hit it again. But the point is, it's pretty flat. I think at the corners, you can see a slight, I don't know if you can see it. This one gives a slight bit. Anyway, that'll be taken care of because, as I pointed out before, this will ultimately get glued to this, and this will help. If it's all cemented down, it should help it keep the whole thing flat. And if that doesn't do it, it's going to get glued down onto the platform, the surface for the railroad. So wherever I decide to place it at. And I wanted to mention about this warpage and putting on this varnish. It's a common problem, actually. It turns out that I was looking at how artists deal with this issue, and apparently it's possible to heat the board to create some give. What I found was that when I coated the other side, it did exactly what this side did in just the opposite way, and I think they offset one another. And I also tried doing just some like encouragement, just kind of little bending exercise to flatten it out. which has worked out perfectly. I mean, it's nice and flat. So the next step then, of course, with the foundation is to cut the slots out where the track will go. And I've thought about it quite a lot. I got to be careful because it occurred to me that, having watched the video I referenced in the previous video here, it was like a Boomer video on how to do this. It is important that the track is underneath because this is going to, the actual foundation that we have here has to overlay the ties. And the only thing you want to see when it's finished is going to be the rails. So the slots that I cut out and the edges where the foundation remains around the track, it's got to get sanded back a bit so that the rails that extend past, the ties that extend past the rails are covered by the foundation material, and that centerpiece then is going to have to get sanded down so that when it gets laid in, it's not as high as the rails. It's like the warning that's been given in that video is that you don't want the flange. Well, you want the flange to stay on the inside of the rail, but you don't want the flat of the wheel to ride up on the edge of the cement. It's just not going to flow well. So we'll have to give enough space when I cut the slots that I'll have to do some trimming, and they'll make sure that there's enough gap between the center piece and the rail so that the flanges can roll through without any obstruction, regardless of what kind of wheel sets I have on the rolling stock. So here we are with this. The next step you'll see is going to be the slotting and work on that to get the track in. And of course, just a reminder, the track will be glued to this first, and then this will be dropped over that. I decided to, before I make any changes to this foundation, like cutting out the slots I just mentioned, I'm going to add I'm going to use this type of bracing to align the building. And I was going to do that first because, by the way, I'm using this super glue to do that. But the point of it is, I can show you this. Okay, so you can see that the initial brace is installed. I'll do the rest of them off camera, but I just wanted to show you that I've done this because once it's braced here all the way around, then the center lines for these entrances where the track has to be laid will be fixed. And I felt that was pretty important to do that before I cut anything or measured anything, because otherwise this will just move around a bit, the structure on the foundation. So there's that. Now I've got the bracing installed on the foundation, and you can see inside there where the bracing, it just passes in between the vertical structure of the wall. And it's fairly secure. It has completed the two objectives I had. One is that it aligns the building tightly to the foundation so that when I apply the trackage to the inside, that the cuts will be aligned specifically for the position that it's in. So it'll be fairly precise. And then, of course, the other thing was that it makes the model removable. So I can, if I can remove the model from the foundation, should I need to do some work on the interior, making some improvements. And, we all know how model railroads are never finished. So there's that. So, but it's fairly, see that? It works pretty well for the alignment. So I'm happy with that. Now the next thing I want to do is actually make the cuts for the track. So we'll go ahead and get that done. And once that's complete and I have the track in place, then I can build this extension. as you can see, I've marked out on the foundation the areas that I want to remove. But in order to do that, I needed to contrive some means to make my best guess at where the markings should be placed on the foundation. The first thing I did towards that effort was I created this tool. And what the tool does is it's a piece of popsicle stick or craft stick that you can buy anywhere. And I cut it so that the stick would be pretty much the width inside of these restraints that I mounted onto the foundation to hold the structure in place. So that, given that, I had then used my center finding ruler, and I marked the center in pink on it. So with that center mark, I then placed it onto, oh, I did that. Let me get it right for you. It's this way. And marked how the stall tops are placed on the structure. So now I've got these markings that allow me to then create additional center marks in the middle of each of those. So with those center marks, they're really talking about the center of each one of the stalls. And I did it with the same tool, with that center finding ruler. So I'm trying to get it as precise as I can. And so given that there's center marks on there, the next thing I did was I looked up, remember I'm a newbie, so I had to look it up. But the space between the rails on most track, HO scale, is 0.65 inches. So if it's 0.65 inches, so I was looking at this, and I was using my caliper tool that I've got. It's not an expensive caliper tool, it's a very cheap one, but it works. I think it gets the job done. So I was looking at the caliper tool and verifying that the flanges, that is between the outer part of this flange here and the outer part of that flange, comply with the 0.65 that, according to my sources on the internet, that's the standard for HO. So I then took and checked what the spread on these guys are, because of course the 0.65 is really the inner spacing, and they're fairly close, a little bit different. These are this one here was slightly narrower, and it came off of this beautiful box car. Wow, it's actually some kind of business car, I think. Anyway, if anybody's watching this and you know what the actual purpose of this car was, let me know. It could be, it's got ventilation, so maybe it's a cattle car. Not so sure. But anyway, so, that aside, I then took and added from the 0.65, I added another 0.06 of thickness, which is actually about 0.36 on either side, to be able to make the final markings on here that you see. There's one here, and there's one here, and the same thing over here. And I used those marks then to set down, you can see these ink marks that I made there on the line right now. Well, the line was drawn through the ink marks. So, placing this, there you go. Placing this on here, you can see that the markings are where I placed the ink marks. And then, of course, I just used the steel rule to draw the lines. But I did measure back from the end of the two-stall engine house foundation. I believe that's 1 inch. Yeah, 1 inch from the back, where this space here will be used for support staff to have shelving and things eventually. But to this point, I think I wanted to just make sure that I explained the manner in which I created this cutout region. And so, of course, now go ahead and cut it out. But once I'm complete with that, then that, of course, has to get sanded. Once I do it, I'll have to sand around the edges of it so that this edge of the track right here, which is a little bit thick, it's a lot less thick than the rail on top, but I mean, it's got to lay flat. It's got to lay flat so that, that the foundation can lay over that. So put it like that, something like that. You'll get the idea. I'll show you in more detail when I get the cut done, sanding and everything, and start working on this. I want to build that extension next. So there you have it, foundation. At this point, the foundation has been cut to reveal where the track has to be placed through. And as I pointed out, this track has to be mounted beneath the foundation. So as I said, I was going to try to remove material from the foundation so that the ties would not lift the foundation. In other words, the foundation would fit over the ties. And towards that end, I was experimenting with a piece that I'd cut off to see if I could grind down the inside. What I had done, it's difficult to see, but what I had done was I marked where I wanted to remove some of the mat board in order to allow the ties to be flush with the surface of the mat board. And I got to say, that was really a dumb idea. I've done some dumb things, but that was super dumb. I mean, it created a whole lot of fibrous waste and uneven cuts, and it was just a mess. It was beyond belief. So I still need to do it. So what I came up with was this piece right here. And what this piece will be is, if I were to compare for you the thicknesses of the ties with this is balsa wood. The ties in the balsa wood have pretty much the same thickness. In fact, as far as I can see, they are the same thickness. So what I'm going to do is place this underneath the fiberboard, the mat board, and I'm going to relieve the space necessary to allow the ties, the edge of the ties coming out here, to be underneath the foundation, but still allow the trackage to be elevated to allow the train to roll in. I think it's going to look okay, but I wasn't sure how I was going to make the connection, the mechanical attachment between the mat board and the balsa wood. So I created this test piece. It's a little piece of mat board and a little piece of balsa wood, and I used wood glue. And it turns out that's a doggone good joint. So I have no fear about doing this. I'm going to glue this after I cut away the necessary amount of basswood. Now, one thing I will mention about some of these things, like for instance, mat board. Let me just say, mat board is not easy to cut, even with the sharpest alpha. It hurt my wrist, after so many attempts to get through it. I just had to persist, but I don't know that mat board is just about as good as balsa or basswood. I think I'm going to stick with those two in the future and avoid mat board. I chose mat board because I'm cheap, and it was relatively inexpensive. So there's that. And the next thing I imagine I'm going to do, also I wanted to mention too about balsa wood and basswood. There's these little grains in here, and when I cut with the Olfa, the very first cut, I use a straight edge. I put down a straight edge and then I slide the alpha along it. But I noticed that if the first, I got this good advice from watching a YouTube, like most of my stuff because I'm a newbie. But I noticed that my first slice, if I pressed ever so lightly and kept it against the edge of the straight edge, it would be fine after that. And every subsequent cut seemed to follow. But I also noticed that if I didn't go really light and careful to keep it along, it migrates because the grain or any even divots, like the slightest divot in the surface of the, well, in this case, balsa wood, causes the blade to migrate. So you wind up with cuts that, let's see if I can show you that. I may have, yeah, that may not be on this piece, sorry. But anyway, it causes the blade to skew off. Just a note to myself and to anybody watching this is that's a possibility. You really got to be careful and guard against that because once it does migrate, every subsequent cut wants to cut the same way. And it is a bear to try to keep the blade straight when it encounters the errant cut. You know, it's one thing to keep in mind. So the next thing I will present then will be, I would say, pretty much the finished foundation construction. Of course, the foundation has to be painted. And I need to varnish this balsa wood so that it doesn't, absorb any moisture and begin to warp. And besides which, more varnish along the edges inside where I've relieved the material making these cuts. So I've got some varnishing to do first. Then I'm going to glue it. I think I believe what I will do with the varnish though is I'm going to lightly sand it to give it tooth. And I don't know if any of you watch videos about how the seasoned modelers assure that their glues bond properly. The term tooth is something that I've picked up from watching videos like that. So onward and upward. What I'm showing here are the three main pieces for the foundation just laid out for you to look at. And I've just explained how the relief cuts were made in the mat board so that the track can come through. And I explained that this piece of balsa wood is going to be used as a spacer rather than try to cut relief into the base of this thing, which would be impossible. This will actually act as a spacer, so the track, once it's placed in there, is going to be above. Like that. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Something like that. There we go. It'll be able to lie. The track will lie flat where it's mounted, and it won't interfere with the foundation by displacing it up. And of course, then the entire thing will be mounted to this thin piece of plastic underneath. So the track will be glued to the plastic. So what I'll do is I'm going to align the foundation. Then when I get this placed, I'll mark the location where the track has to go. And then I'm going to super glue the track to this plastic. And God help me if I get that wrong, because it's going to be a bear to get it back off again. In fact, I wouldn't be able to. So that'll be a mess. Hopefully I get it right. And the other thing I wanted to mention quick was I took that sample that I had, and I was wondering about how to attach the plastic to the balsa wood. And so I used super glue. I used this material right here. So that worked out perfect. I mean, that's a super bond. So I've got everything I need. I'm all lined up. Got my white glue. So it's time to do the assembly of the three main pieces of the foundation, including trackage, which I have two pieces of Trek, and I'm really hoping that these are nickel silver Trek, because some Trek I have is so old that, it's beyond hope. It's all rusted. So that was the old copper tracks. Okay, I'll show you the final assembly. This is the goal, is to have the track super glued, or actually Plastistruct glued, we're going to use that, welded, to this thin plastic layer down below. And also, at this point of assembly, the balsa wood has been mounted onto the mat board, and there's the channeling that was the plan for recess for keeping the track ties out of the way, so that when this is mounted, it'll be flush. It'll be nice and flush, and that'll require a little bit of alignment and mark where the track has to be, so the track will actually be Plastistruct onto this. I hope this plastic will take the Plastistruct. We'll find out. I'll have to build a test piece. Oh, and by the way, how I assembled this, and just quickly throw up a little picture here that shows how I kept it flat while it was being mounted with the wood glue. I still haven't attached the foundation to the thin plastic sheet. The tracks are attached to the thin plastic sheet that underlies the foundation. But I've discovered I have an issue. I can demonstrate it this way. This is not, it's not flowing. And the reason why is that the side brace on the trucks is actually engaging the surface of the foundation. I mean, even if I push it down, I can push it down, and it's better, but not great. It'll eventually hit some spot where it can't continue. And I realize that's just plain too close for comfort. So part of my solution is going to be is to actually remove some of the material on the surface of this, on the mat board. And the reason for that is this picture I'm showing right here, that it shows that the mat board already engages the top of these ties, and for my purposes, it tells me that I can't, just shim the track up somehow. I mean, there's just too many things working against that. The ties of the track are actually super glued now to the thin plastic, and trying to get that to release may be impossible, and cutting it out and trying to shim it up a little is also not possible, again, because of what I'm showing in this picture right here. So it's just the only real solution that I can find is to actually hog out some of the material along the edge of each of the two cutouts, and then revarnish it and hope that it doesn't look too nasty. But I'll do my best. We'll see how that works out. I made the first cut along this side right here, and I initially took and using an alpha, and what I did was I made a slice along the lines you see, and then I came back in and I made an additional cut very carefully along the soft material of this. And so I was able to make just enough of a penetration with the alpha to be able to peel off and remove that section of the mat board off the top. And then what I did was I painted it with the glue, right? This stuff right here, with my white glue. And just so you know, the way I created the lines was I made this tool right here, and I just slid it along like the entire length and made marks And this tool allowed me to keep an even space for the hog out on either side. So you see the pencil lines, they're evenly spaced based on this tool right here. I've completed assembly of the foundation, which includes all of the side cuts to make room for the truck side frames. And it operates very smoothly now, and there's no grab. So both sides are working excellent. Now, what I need to do finally is to install the center fill. And I believe this plastic is thick enough where just cementing that down should do just fine. So I'll cement that down, and then that will conclude the whole foundation assembly and debug. So the foundation now is complete as assembly goes. It, of course, still needs to be painted, and a lot of minor tweaking that may take place, but this is the completed two-stall engine house as assembly goes for the foundation. The structure itself still needs a lot of work. Like you can see, windows are missing. The door has to be elevated a little bit. The roof has to be, completed. But all of that aside, I think in the main, there's a darn nice looking two-stall engine house. I'm going to start work in the next video on the extension and also complete this centerpiece here. I've got some ideas on how to do that. But thank you for coming along on this weird journey. It was quite an exercise in stepping over issues, and I would say a good example of what Boomer calls fail forward. Thanks again. Ed and Mary Ryan have just finished watching this video, and I think we should listen in. There's about to be a little conversation between them about it. Man, that was a good video, Mary. A good video. Well, if you say so, Dad. I do, Mary. Best video ever, girl. That's nice. But I didn't leave a light. I just forgot. Oh my goodness. Poor Mary. She forgot to leave a like. Well, I hope none of you make that mistake.